Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Real Talk. As you can tell, Jerry's not in the center seat. I am in the center seat today. Those who are listening, I am in the center seat. Jerry is out visiting his family up in New York, so we want to wish him safe travels and enjoy his time with his family. Today, we're gonna have an individual or a gentleman that is sitting to my right that needs probably not too much introduction, but I'm going to do a little bit of it. He's Quinton Beckham. Quinton Beckham is the broker of Keller Williams Alliance. He is the current president of Charlottesville Association Realtor, and probably has the distinction of being a very dear friend of mine. So I couldn't think of anybody else to sit in this right-hand seat of where I'm sitting right now and to talk. So we're going to do things a little bit differently today. We're going to kick things off with a question, but I just want to first off by thanking Intrastate Service Company, a home's best friend. You know, we are both in the real estate space, and if there's realtors listening or watching this show, please reach out to them. They help you get to the finish line. They do it repetitively for Yonna and I, so please reach out and give them a call. So we're going to do something a little bit different. Judah's going to put on the screen for those who are watching my personal cell number. So if you have a question for Quinton or myself, it can be on real estate, life, coffee, wine. What do you think?
I think all those topics are fine. I just don't want people to assume that we're an expert on any of those
we're not an expert
subjects.
on anything.
Yeah.
But we're going to have a lot of fun. So the goal.
I think before you ask me anything about life, you should get to know me first and then decide whether that's valid.
Well, I get to know you. It's extremely valid. So my cell number, for those who wish to text a question in, who may be on the road or want to multitask and watch us live on Facebook and text, is 434-531-0795. I've got my phone. I'll be watching that. Quinton over to my right is going to be watching all these different feeds on that end of it. But without any further ado, I'm going to introduce my dear friend, Quinton Beckham. And for those who do not know you, which is probably about 6 people, tell us a little bit about Quinton Beckham.
He's really happy for coffee this morning. It was sort of an odd start today. Things are running a little bit behind, and a little extra caffeine to get the neurons firing.
I have to say, when you rolled in, you had that look on your face like, hey, Quinton, why don't you go get some coffee?
Yeah, just stop talking to me. I'm going to get coffee.
Stop talking to me. So I want to kick the show off with a question that I've been getting asked a lot in the last particular couple of weeks. And we've been texting back and forth a little bit about this in the last couple of days. But the question is this word inflation, right? As he sips his coffee. So
such an awesome word.
It's an awesome word. So, the question that I've been asked, and I'm going to pivot it to you because you're just like a genius, is will inflation impact the real estate market? And if so, how? And if not, why? Big question.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of questions all wrapped into one. Inflation, when it happens, impacts damn near everything, so real estate would not be excluded from that. I think what's most important when you talk about inflation and the potential for it is the opportunity for just the general spending power of a dollar to diminish. And a lot of people are really young. We talk about inflation like we know what inflation is in the last couple of decades, but a lot of the folks that I interact with were not really alive and purchasing things in the 70s and 80s.
Oh, I remember those all too well.
And that was when inflation was really a big deal. Double digit, year over year in the 10 to 14% range. And I think it was 1981 where it peaked at 20% inflation year over year, measured on a variety of things and averaged out. And there's a gentleman by the name of Paul Volcker.
I remember that name.
Carter put him in his Fed chair and said, hey, fix the inflation problem. And he said, okay, but you're not going to like it. And he basically had them stop printing money. And so if you sort of picture a little island, and whatever's on the island is all that's there, and there's $100 to use to buy and sell things on the island. If there becomes $1,000, there's still only so many coconuts. And so now, instead of them being $1, they're $10. And his solution was, I'm just going to stop printing money, and this be how we're going to fix this. And it worked to a degree. It also created a recession that led into the 80s. It was one of the tipping points for that. But it did work to a degree to do that. Interesting little side note, Paul Volcker is the same guy that took us off the gold standard, so you couldn't trade in a dollar for a dollar's worth of gold anymore, so that the economy could grow.
So one of the things that Jerry and I have been talking about on the show repetitively, and it's just something that I've been coined, and I'd love to hear your reaction to it. I believe one of the best hedges against inflation now, today, is to buy a home. Right? Would you agree with that or disagree with that?
I would want you to tell me more about that.
So we just had a note here that rents are climbing. Rents are $200 nationwide, so 200 according to Washington Post, is $200 higher in this year in June 20 versus in 19. It's about $200. So if I buy a home today at 2.77% interest rate, 3% interest rate, that locks in for 30 years, right? So what happens is you are now locked in. You're not going to be caught in this rental inflation range. So as far as homes are concerned, as far as residency, as far as living is concerned, buying now, in my opinion, is the best way to hedge against what we believe is inflation is coming down the road. So if I buy something now, I'm fixed at $1,200, $1,500 a month. It's done. 2 years from now, if I'm renting, that $1,500 may be $1,700 and maybe $1,800. Does that make sense?
And I think what you're saying is true, and we could have said that same thing 5 years ago, and it would have been just as true, even though rates are lower today than they were then.
That is true.
Because there's still cost of goods involved, and the sale prices changing, and all of that sort of jazz. So it is always a sound argument, assuming all things being equal on the buyer's side, assuming all that stuff is equal, it is always a sound argument to say, if you want to build wealth, if you want to fix your housing costs, if you want to avoid the deleterious effects of inflation, owning your home is a better way to go.
So this concept of the text questions are working so far.
Oh, you're getting text questions. Good.
I got a text question, and I'm trying to figure out how I can articulate this text question a little bit better. So for those who are listening, Quinton and I are both wearing on our lapels a little lapel pin, and it's multicolored. It has a rainbow colored on one side, and then on the right-hand side, it fades in from white to a darker color. I'm getting questions. What is this? You want to talk about that a little bit? What does this represent?
I will happily do that. So if we're switching topics a
I
little
know that.
bit.
I'm sorry.
Switching topics a touch.
I was excited that my text,
pause.
I was excited my texting worked.
So if you really dig into this, we have a variety of colors. You've got a sort of pseudo little rainbow flag on the side. It looks like I was in the military and served in some particular tour, and that's not true. It's not one of those service pens. But National Association of Realtors has a product out that's a class for agents called Fairhaven, where you walk through and perform deals in which fair housing is violated or potentially violated. And it has you choose. If you remember as a kid, the books where you would pick your own adventure and you would highlight things and the words would appear and it would tell you what came next and what page to turn to. It's very much like that, only way more interesting and much better art. And interspersed in that, there's videos of persons that have experienced actual non-fair housing situations.
You're speaking of Fairhaven.
Yes, Fairhaven. And in addition to that, we have At Home with Diversity, which is sort of a training class and a certification that you can get as a realtor to understand different diverse groups you might serve and how to best serve them and not do that poorly. So if you complete those things, you get to have this lovely little pen that is one of my favorite designs from NAR, because they have a lot of pens and sometimes they're large and unwieldy. But this is a real cool pen just to sort of show off and promote the idea that fair housing is fair housing for all, and that we embrace that.
Those who know me know I'm a Marine. For me to swap this out from my Marine Corps emblem is indicative of how much it means to me. I will tell you, I've been in this business for 30 years plus years. I've been part of NAR forever. That Fairhaven tool was the best tool that they ever did. And it's funny because you can't fudge it. you have to, if you have these latent or these thoughts that just in the back of your mind, you don't think about it. There's a term for that.
We might call those implicit biases.
That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Implicit biases. You don't know that because you take it because it'll bring them out. And it's interesting because I took it thinking, look, I've been doing this forever. I get this. I come from a multiracial, multicultural family. I get it, right? And I got some wrong. And I was embarrassed.
It's really interesting to me. I have a diverse background as well,
Sure.
and I always think of myself as being fairly educated on the topics. And yet, as we've dived into this over the last 3 years, every time I turn around, there's more to learn, there's more to understand, and I am fortunate enough to be surrounded by people that are more than happy to help me figure it out.
Well, I'm just excited. I got a text question in.
I'm so happy that worked.
It worked. Who knew? I'm curious what Mr. Miller thinks of it. I'll hear if he thinks this is a good idea or a bad idea. But back to that inflation thing. So the Washington Post had this little link that you can actually take a test, like a quiz on it. And it was funny. I had an interesting conversation with Scott Morris, who's one of our sponsors for the show, and with Ross Mortgage. And we were just having a conversation because my little brother Michael just had a baby boy yesterday. So that's number 10. I've got 10. I'm an uncle times 10. So it's just amazing. But it was like, oh, hey, look, we're going to have a family thing together. And I went to Costco yesterday to buy some beef. And I decided to pivot to chicken. It was like double what it was this time last year. And according to, it went from, it is currently roughly $4.87 a pound. A year ago, it was down to $3.90. Excuse me, 2 years ago, it was down to $3.90. So I just, I want to kind of pivot a little bit back to this inflation conversation because we went off on a tangent on this Fairhaven. Keith got excited that his text concept worked. Only once, by the way. That's only one question in it. So please ask us some questions, and we will go ahead and tear into them a little bit. But are you getting anything on the feed?
Nicholas Erpy's watching. Daniel Pettit was reminiscing to buying his first house at a 13% interest rate on his mortgage.
We beat him. We were 18.
I was 18 after a 1-point buy down on my very first home in Southern California. Yes, it was in the 80s, a long time ago. I'm curious, as we have the Erpies, as I've decided to refer to them collectively, watching what sort of interest they might have in this. But I find inflation an interesting idea because we think it's supply and demand, but it's only loosely associated with it. In fact, sometimes it's the fuel for supply and demand. And you have what they term the price-wage spiral. So unemployment goes down, lots of people are working, you have to pay more money to get skilled workers, and people that are good for jobs, they now make more money, so they can buy more goods, and suppliers raise the prices. And we call this inflation. And so it's not even necessarily a demand thing, although we can create moments of it if you think back to when everybody was waiting in line at gasoline stations.
I remember those days. I remember sitting in the back of the car, my mother panicking because there was hoping. I mean, I don't know if folks remember when we had this little gasoline hiccup, this little computer hiccup, right?
Yeah.
So remember what happened? If folks remember in the 70s, that was like for months and months.
I do remember when you had to get in line according to your license plate.
Yep, sure.
But I find our recent event really interesting because it points out another key point of inflation, and that really inflation has a lot more to do with behaviors than it does economics. So if you go back to Paul Volckel's day and you talk to him, he passed away December 2019, but there's a really good interview with him on NPR. And what he basically explains was, the issue is not necessarily economics when it comes to inflation. It's really about people and how they behave, and you have to change those behaviors to tamp down inflation. And the Feds picked 2% as a nice inflation point because then they've got some room if the economy starts to slow down to drop interest rates and make money more available. And so now we're talking about inflation now, because there are banks and institutions holding hundreds of millions of dollars that the government has flooded out in the form of pandemic relief. And there is this thought that depending on how all of that is spent, that might stimulate another round of inflation, more so than what we've been accustomed to in the last decade, where it's stayed really steadily at 2%.
So the premise of this article from the Washington Post was not everything is inflating, right? And it was interesting, and they went through these list of items, right? And two of them in particular were apparel and airline, which I got wrong, right? So they were talking about that in the summer of this year, in June of this year, a men's jacket was roughly $230. Back in 19, it actually was $300. So it's actually certain things are less. Airline, which I expected to be more expensive now than it was 2 years ago, is down. It was $300. A typical domestic flight, according to Washington Post, currently is $325. This time 2 years ago it was $358. And I would have thought with fuel going up.
That one actually surprised me.
Yeah.
When we talk about beef, that sort of thing, that didn't really surprise me a whole lot. I've been expecting that, and as we've been out to restaurants, I was at the Aberdeen Barn. Thank you, Angela. It was lovely last night.
Cool.
And they've had to raise some of their prices because their suppliers are
beef.
raising theirs.
We went back to this whole.
We went back to beef.
Yeah.
But it surprised me that airline tickets were less.
Yeah, I did a little research on that because I quite didn't believe, and it's actually true. But
So the Washington Post didn't lie to you, is what you're saying?
I'm thinking the Washington Post didn't lie to me, but maybe the other places lied the same as Washington Post. But here's a killer, and maybe we'll throw this out to the feed and see if somebody can come back to it. Spring of 2021, the average cost of a used car was $22,533. Anybody want to guess what it was in June 2019? So this is nationwide. Right, so it was a used car, and we've been talking about driving till you qualify, flying till you qualify, right? And this has a direct impact into housing costs and affordable housing and all these things we've been talking about, because if you're living 30, 40, 50 minutes away from the work, more than likely you are driving in this environment because we just don't have the public transport to do it. But this knocked my proverbial socks off. So I know that you looked at it, but I'm just curious if somebody can either text or come in and go
So
ahead
this
and
is
do
where this is where I feel like we need an economist, because when I read and try to learn a little bit about inflation and have an informed opinion about it, it feels very separate from the issue of supply and demand. So when you go to the used car prices, which were the biggest reason our overall inflation markers jumped during the pandemic, because used car prices make up 1% of the total index, but they went up by a dramatic amount and really tilted that index up. And I want to say they were responsible for 2/3 of the overall rise in inflation because of that single price. But that was really a function of supply and demand.
That's exactly right.
Because chips and factories slowed down and production slowed down. People moved away from public transportation and had to have different cars to get to and from work and this and that. And more new used cars came on the market at a higher price point as well, because families that had two only needed one. They went ahead and sold it. And so I'm really...
Do you think COVID had something to do with that, with the moving?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, sure.
I think in both ways, both in there being more used cars put out there and still not enough to meet the demand of people no longer wanting to sit on a subway.
So I confirmed this number, not officially, not with any great science date to it. I reached out to Ned Galloway, who happens to be the manager of car lots on Pantops, and happens to also be the Albemarle County Board of Supervisors chairman. And I was asking him, I says, is this spread, if this spread will, is real? Is this spread real? So getting a couple more questions in here. My ADD just kicked in, so I'm going to look at the phone.
You look at the phone.
I'll look at the phone real quick. But anybody in there take a wild guess of how much that spread was?
They have not yet. I think what's interesting though is used car prices will not cause inflation. Yes, they will raise the ticker, but there's only so many purchases to happen, and it's not going to cause the kind of inflation that we talk about when we're talking at the federal level.
So a used car today, according to this, versus 19, will cost you $6,586 more.
And I think the difference is inflation by definition.
Ned didn't confirm that number, but he said it is more expensive.
I don't disagree.
Yeah.
I think the difference being inflation means that your dollar's worth less versus a product being priced higher.
So a question came in from our dear friend Nick Erpy. Nick.
He is watching us, and he's getting ready to ask scary things. I just know it.
Yeah, well, he's also asking Smith to read and think at the same time, and that could be a dangerous thing. So definition of inflation is, he just answered my question. I love
definition of inflation is the purchasing power of a given currency reducing over time.
So those who know, that was Nick's question, the definition of inflation, and Quinton Beckham just answered it. So there's a little follow-up then. So we're seeing value of goods and prices, a goods crisis. Perhaps that's not a purchasing power crisis tied to currency, though they are admittedly tied together. So let's talk about the Erpies and Emergent Financial a little bit. Even though they don't sponsor our show, I want to give a shout out to these guys.
Please do.
One of the shows that I had the most fun at is when I had Xavier and Alex sitting across. For some reason, Nick wasn't there, and maybe the awesomeness of me and Nick being on the thing, it just probably was too much for everybody, too much for these guys. But I do want Nick, when they come back on, Nick, we're going to have to find an extra microphone for you, because I got a feeling you and I'd have a ton of fun sitting over here sharing a mic.
They are good folks, yes.
But hey, look, if you're looking for some help, they're helping out Keith and Yonna Smith. Please reach out to these folks. They're great. So let's see what other fun things I've got coming in on.
My favorite thing, and I'm curious if Nick's going to chime on this too, my favorite thing when you read about inflation is that inflation is really based mostly on what our expectation is. And so if I'm planning to, I don't know, let's say I want to get into the gasoline industry before it, converts all to EV, and I am buying futures, I am going to predict a certain cost in the future, and I'm going to take into account my personal expectation of inflation. And if my personal expectation is low and I can buy it low, it'll stay low. If the company's expectation is low, they're not going to try and jack up the price. If I'm booking events, I'm booking ahead and I'm prepaying food and space, and inflation takes a portion of that as they're booking a year and 2 years out. In our mortgage rates, there is a portion of the mortgage rates that is designed to accommodate for the fluctuation in inflation. And so there is a feedback loop that I'm not sure I understand, but I've had a really good time reading about. So it's a lot like marriage, that if we expect a lot of inflation, we then create it.
Yeah.
And so
but it goes both ways too, right?
And if we expect low inflation, we create that as well.
Well, it's kind of like we maybe the coffee's kicking in for both of us, and we're getting on a roll here. But it's kind of like the inflation in the housing market. Some of it is data. We like to talk about a lot of data and days on market and what products coming on the market, off the market, and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, and Jerry and I kind of go back and forth on this stuff from time to time, and I don't know if you agree or disagree with this, but to me, almost any transaction I've ever been in over 3 decades, anything from a multi-million-dollar commercial transaction to a first-time home buyer at $100,000, there's always, buy or sell, there's always these levels of emotional capital that has to be considered. It has to be part of it. And it's just, it's not just numbers. It's not just Am I getting a good price, or is my mortgage rate right, or this, that, and the other thing. It's how you feel, how you want to live in this home. And I know we're getting a little bit off, and I'm just trying to pivot a little bit here to something a little bit different. But we're talking inflation, we're talking numbers, we're in the real estate space. At the end of the day, this is emotional, and I would agree with you. People, I made an emotional decision. My family's getting chicken on Sunday.
I think there are emotional decisions, and it can go both ways. Our recent little gas crisis is an indicator of that. There was our perception, or the city's people's perception, that there wasn't going to be gasoline tomorrow.
Yeah.
Created
Sure.
a shortage
Sure.
as they panic bought.
Sure.
I would imagine there were some price changes at local stations. I didn't really pay much attention because I drove past in my electric vehicle,
EV.
feeling really smug and full of myself as I watched everybody waiting in
How'd that
line.
go for you?
Oh, it was awesome.
Did you felt great? Did you sleep
It
well
was
that
awesome.
night? Did you sleep
Yeah,
well?
it was great. I just quietly. That's the other advantage. Is they're quiet, so you can just sneak past as everybody puts gasoline into plastic bags.
Have a sound mode in it or something like that?
It does, but it's still a little.
Got it.
It's still a little on the quiet side.
Well, we're both bikers. As a biker, those EVs scare the hell out of me because I can't hear them sometimes, and they sneak up on you, and you go, oh damn.
Yeah, I understand. But I think we saw some of that as well in the housing market as the pandemic hit, when we had these all cash offers.
Sure.
That were in competition, that were $25,000, $50,000, $100,000 higher than the list price. We sort of created some of that price hike based on our desire and our panic around missing out.
So I read an article this morning called "The Number One Reason Home Buyers Are Moving Further Away from Big Cities," and that was in Realtor.com. You've kind of popped this into my head and pivot a little bit, and I'm trying to track my phone a little bit for questions on that end of it. You're in leadership, right? You're an owner of a broker, right? Brokerage, multiple brokerages, I might say. Do you see this trend going or is this a trend that's been going on for a while, this moving out to the country, for lack of a better term?
All of the data says that the initial wave outside of the cities has receded and that there's still movement back into cities. I think we're not done with the pandemic yet, and we need to see what happens as we move through Delta and Lambda and whatever is in store for us in the months ahead.
Hold on a second. Is that a reference to Animal House?
It is not. That Lambda's the one in South America right now. Delta's the one next door.
But was it the Delta, the Animal House?
It was,
Delta?
now that you mention it, yeah.
What was the other one? Lambda,
I
or something like
Yeah.
that. Tri-Lambs.
Tri-Lambs.
Thank you.
It was the Tri-Lambs. Yeah.
I'm sorry? Oh, was that Revenge of the Nerds? You're right. But Delta House was definitely. Sorry, I got off on a side tangent here, guys. He's double checking that now.
No, I am replying to Dan Pettit that said that soon you will see Keith quietly going by gas stations on his electric bike.
Yes, thank you, Dan. It's in the works. I have to convince Mrs. Smith, but I've got an interim bike that I have to first convince Mrs. Smith to buy, and then we can buy the other thing. But literally, that's what I'm working on. It's rad. I love them to death. They're out of Seattle. Great company. You can get something between $1,000 and $2,000. And as you know, our office is on Studio X, or in the X Park, and I have some meetings downtown. And I'm planning to pick one up because I can drive in from town, right? Because we live 15 miles out.
And then take it around.
And take it around. I'm looking forward to it. Instead of walking from there to here sweating because it's 102 degrees out and all that stuff. So while we're on that subject, I just got another text in, which is a bit of a pivot on that. We're kind of going around this EV thing. So it's from somebody, it's just a phone number, but it's for somebody who apparently knows that you just took a trip with your EV up to Vermont, and they were asking to talk about that experience. How did that work for you?
Oh, you mean how was it to take a long road
Yeah.
trip in an electric vehicle?
Mm-hmm.
It was actually really cool. I will tell you that you have to plan a little bit more thoroughly on the upfront.
Okay.
Some of that's my own anxiety about
Sure.
going that far, and are there going to be places to charge? But there's a PlugShare app. It's a great app that you can plan your trip.
Let's go back, because that is, anxiety is a real thing, because Yonna and I are having this conversation, and even though we're only 15 miles away, it's like if we're going to go up, so we've got grandkids in Connecticut,
Yeah.
so talk to us. Tell us how that works.
One of the things I have learned is how big a mile is.
Oh, explain that.
A mile is a long ways, and we don't drive as many of them as we feel like we do. And so if I charge on a Sunday, I can do 10 days before it even gets down from 80% to 50.
Yeah, but you live in the city, right? So that's...
I live in the city, but you're saying that like you're not driving out of state when you go home, Keith. There's not bridges and barges and other
Sure.
things that you're having to pass through. It's
Or
really
get
not
stuck
that
on,
far.
Or get stuck on.
Or get stuck on.
Sure.
And you have the opportunity to plug it in at night when you get home and wake up to a freshly charged battery. So
How many miles a day do you put on your car, you think?
I have no idea.
Got it.
I have no idea. Now, the road trip, though, spending time around town has been a breeze, and I've never not had enough juice to get anywhere I wanted to go, even when I was not terribly thoughtful and I didn't charge it the night before. Traveling longer, what I liked about this road trip is we had pre-planned stops. Most of my friends are sort of, hey, we've got a 12-hour drive. Let's see if we can do it in 8. And you're sitting in the back seat because you haven't gotten to use the restroom in 6 hours. You're sweating, you're hot, you're racing down the freeway. And yes, Elena, I am talking about you. And you're racing down the freeway, and it's this competition.
I've heard stories about Elena's driving at our little cocktail hour we had the other day.
Yeah,
there was unabashed discussion about don't get in the car with Elena. I'm just saying.
I don't know that if you're going anywhere with Elena, Elena would like to get there first.
Yeah, got it.
And she's just grown up in areas where that was how you drove.
Sure.
I'm from LA. You take me back to LA and you stick me in a car on the freeway.
Dude,
all the aggressive driving instincts come out.
I cross the Delaware Bridge and work into, Yonna will tell you, I become a very different guy.
Yeah, I don't
Very
doubt that.
different guy.
What I liked about this trip is we had pre-planned stops. It took me 10 to 15 minutes being plugged in, which is not
about
that
how
long.
That works. How does that actually? Because I'm generally, I know people are watching and listening, but I've generally wanted.
It's a charging station. You drive in, like Sheetz has tons of them. You'll see them at Walmarts. There's some not far from us at the Albemarle County
So
building.
you like organize a P stop for lack of a
So
better
you
term.
you organize a
Rest
stop
whatever you want to call it.
where you get out, you stretch your legs, you use the restroom, you refresh your drink, you see if there's a snack that you need.
Sure.
You wipe off the windshield from however many bugs that you've ended their lives, and then you get back you unplug it and you get back in the car. It charges your credit card, and you go to the next stop.
So,
And it does add time, but my anxiety level once I was on the road was so much lower because typically if I'm a passenger with one of my friends, and this is more than just Elena I'm talking about, if I'm a passenger with one of my friends, there is this sensation that, okay, we've got 5 minutes, hurry up now, be standing at the car ready to go, because as soon as that gas pump handle clicks,
they're out.
we are on the road
It's
again.
like a NASCAR thing.
It is a true pit stop.
Well, I'm a little older than you, but we're of close enough of an age that, I don't know about you, but about 2 to 3 hours when I'm in the car, nature calls and I need to stop. So in 10 or 15 minutes, how much does it charge up, usually?
I got to 100% every time we stopped.
So 10 minutes to 15 minutes takes
10 to
you from
15
wherever
minutes.
you were.
So you understand there's level 1 chargers, which is basically what these lights are plugged into. It's just regular cord.
110.
And those take days to charge the battery because we're talking kilowatt hours of charge that you need
Got
to
it.
have. The level 2 chargers, which are what people have installed at home, are 220 50 amp breaker, and that will charge you from 0 to 100 in hours. And then the ones that you stop at on the side of the road are anywhere from 50 to 350 in terms of their push and their direct current, so it's a much heavier push. And you can get, at a 50, it might take me 20 minutes to get an 80% charge. At a 150, it might take me 15. Different cars charge at different speeds. It's based on the heat of the battery and their cooling systems and all that sort of thing.
So it was, Jerry and I had a conversation a couple of shows ago. We were talking about public transportation and so forth and so on. And he said something that kind of was an aha moment for me, that, we're having this conversation about the, real estate, we're driving till you qualify, right? The real estate, the affordable housing, we're pushing out from the center, we're going out, and we're going out 15 miles, 20 miles, so forth and so on out there. And the conversation was wrapped around bringing like public transport from, let's say, Lake Monticello, or park and rides, or jaunt, or something like that. And one of the viewers chimed in on something, and we're wrapping this conversation about the EVs again, what impact that might have. So, I'm looking at a Bolt, right? It's just a company car that Yonna and I are looking at, that will get us from our home to work, to go out and see clients. A dear friend of mine, Bob Pino of Design Develop, has company cars, and he turned me on to them. They're probably around 30 grand, right? You're 100% right. They get like 250 miles on it. It'll take us, we clocked our miles, Yonna and I, recently, right? We don't even come close to that in a week. Not even close. So we can charge it, as you said, for once a week, and we're like, okay, well, let's do that. But if this becomes a normal thing, is that going to make this drive till we qualify even worse? Does that
Did you
make
just
sense?
call me abnormal?
No, I did not call you abnormal. Did I call you abnormal? I called you Abby Normal.
I feel pretty normal.
Abby Normal. What movie is that from?
That is from Young Frankenstein.
Very good.
I think it's already on its way there. We're seeing electric vehicles in all types and forms, and it really is. It does require some psychological shift, because we're so used to having gas stations everywhere. And so the infrastructure in terms of places to stop is already there. They've already got the electrical run that can manage it, but it is getting those things put in that is a big deal. And I'm curious to see, as bills roll through Congress, if this actually makes it all the way through and expands that infrastructure network.
So you're starting to see that already. I'm involved with a couple of projects that they're literally taking out car washes to put in EV chargers. Anybody on the feed?
Dirty and electric. Just Daniel Pettit. Daniel Pettit, who's been talking back and forth about EV charging, and it was his birthday yesterday.
Happy birthday, Dan.
He played tennis and had pizza.
He had pizza at the same time. So we were talking yesterday a little bit, you and I, offline, and I think maybe this might be a topic we can throw out there and see what we kind of get, is this rent relief moratorium.
Yeah.
So you want to kind of tackle
the
that a little?
eviction moratorium with rent relief.
Correct. Thank you.
Yeah. I think you should start. You have a lot of information sitting around you there.
So let's talk a little bit about what this means for the folks that may be renting, and then they may have to use this moratorium, because I've done a lot of research on it, and in a certain degree it's very similar to the forbearance program. One of the things, just at a high level, if you're going to have to use this moratorium, it doesn't abate you, it doesn't remove your need to pay any back rent. So this is important to do that. What folks really should be doing if they're trying to do this is to reach out to VDH. There are some great rent relief programs out there. So those who watch the show know that I'm part of what's called the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission. I also chair the Regional Housing Partnership. And what we have done, it started in August of 2020, but we were able to give out $1.6 million in rent relief to folks. What's really important about these rent relief programs, and you can just do a simple Google search on that. The state is kind of taking it over from the commission. I'm going to do a little bit of plug for the commission at this point. This is one of these things that were, in my opinion, local government and state government got it right. Until they were trying to figure out the program, they reached out to us and said, look, you got boots on the ground. Here's $2 million. Work on this until we can go ahead and do this. So at the moment, you can get I have to look up the actual acronym, but if you can Google it, it's Virginia Department of Education and Health, I believe, or something like this. I have to look it up here in a minute. But you can reach out to them. But the important part about this is it's also available to landlords. And most folks don't know that. And there's two paths. If you are a tenant and you need some grant assistance, we did over 2,000, average of 2,000 per request. We did almost 600 requests in the period of August through December of 2020. The state's now taken it over, but it's called the RMRP relief. If you guys Google that, it'll go ahead and point you in the right direction. It's a pretty simple thing to go through it. But if you're a landlord, because that's the flip side to this moratorium, how it impacts the small to medium landlord, and there's grants available out through the state to go ahead and help you on that.
And I think this was a really key thing that paired with the eviction moratorium that helped stabilize a lot of the economics. In how long would you say this program went on? And yet it dispersed $1.6 million plus.
So we only had, so I can't tell you what the current numbers are because the state's handling it. And it was something that we weren't too crazy about at the commission, but we understood it, right? Mm-hmm. The thing is at the commission, I could get my fingers on data any given moment. It's unfortunately run by the state at this point. But in between August and December, we gave out $1.6 million.
It's a lot of money in a short period of time going directly to help people, which I think was great in that program. And we do have Nicholas chiming in again, agreeing that inflation is very highly tied to behavior. Think about this. Roman emperors, and we know how I love talking about benevolent tyrants, Roman emperors would decrease the amount of valuable metals in the coins by very small margins so that the average person wouldn't even notice it. But even with that, the lack of faith that it caused when they were caught created hyperinflation in later empire years, and he really agrees it's highly tied to people's behavior and faith in government and economics.
Numbers are one thing, but do you believe in how you feel and emotions going in there? I'm trying to pick up a couple of notes here that are getting in. Actually, I'm getting them in via email at this point, and I do not have the skills that Mr. Jerry Miller has to go ahead and read things repetitively on that. But so let me see what I got coming in here from somebody. Oh, that was a couple of questions that we already answered on that. A couple more questions about our pins. So that's great news. You got anything else on the feed, sir?
I do not.
So anything you want to talk about, my friend?
Nothing that is earth-shattering. I am really interested to see how the rest of this year plays out. I feel like we saw the light at the end of the tunnel, and then maybe the tunnel got a little bit longer, and nobody's really quite sure. I know so many of my friends that are excited for kids to go back to school, to have a little bit of a return to normalcy in their work lives and their home lives. And I really, really hope that we continue to keep virus under control, COVID under control, and move forward and continue to wrap up our local economies. We certainly know that we're still feeling it in small businesses around town. Real estate's getting a little bit calmer, which I like. We still have some small businesses that are feeling the effects. Shabine's last day is today, as a note. And I would love to see some of this come to a conclusion so that we can move past the pandemic phase of economics and into whatever the new economy is going to be come 2022.
I can't disagree with anything you have said, and I just want to kind of go back a little bit to the Shabine comment. I know Jerry's been covering that quite a bit on his other shows, and I know that we're both connected with the restaurant business from a participation, from a partaking perspective on that end of it. But do you see a pivot a little bit in the restaurant business? Is this thing with Sabine closing down something geared around COVID, right? Or is there a permanent change in the restaurant business? And the reason I bring that up because I believe Red Pump is also changing its model a little bit on this stuff. So is there kind of a
I think you're
pivot?
seeing some of both. I think to move from so many tight restrictions on socializing and on gathering, people may not move quickly back to fully open doors. Some folks might. They've spent a year where they couldn't go to restaurants. They might not go out as often. I think we're also seeing a lot of shortages in staffing. Good, solid, qualified staffing did not return to the restaurant industry as quickly as the restrictions lifted. And some folks have moved on to other professions that they had an opportunity to try out and may not be returning. And so I think there's always going to be unsettlement when you have this swing and this shift in the economy. But I would not be surprised if we got back to something that looked a little bit more normal, even though the signs on the doors are going to be different.
So I'm getting a couple of texts in here to go back to this rent relief program. So we'll do that here in a minute because I'm going to actually look to drop a link in the feed here real quickly while we're doing that. But at the end of the day, hold on a second. I'm not as fast as Mr. Miller, but for those who are on the feed, I just dropped in the link. So the Virginia Rent Relief Program, it's called an RRP. It's on the Virginia Department, it's DHCD. So when you open that up, and it's a pretty simple program, and we helped organize this a little bit. There's two little buttons you click on. One is a tenant, and one is a landlord. And if you click on a tenant, it'll ask you a bunch of questions on it. But this actually will fund up to 15 months of rent. This is a grant now, guys. You don't have to pay it back, right? It's a pretty awesome thing. But if you click on landlord, you can actually do it on behalf of your tenant. And actually, she doesn't know this yet, but on Monday, we're going to have Ally sitting in that seat over there, which I have to...
Oh, Suzanne.
Suzanne in there, because Suzanne was telling me yesterday she's actually using this system to help some of her landlords gain some of the back happen. So this is, I hate this conversation about eviction. It's just a horrible word. And I really don't want to focus on it. What I want to focus on is the ability to go ahead and get relief, right? To get folks and tenants, right? Because this is not a one-sided thing, right? There's tenants that need help, and there's also landlords that need help.
And I think the big drive is we don't want people becoming homeless over this temporary issue.
No, and that totally it is. But I think it's important to have this conversation. I think it's important to get this out there, much like the forbearance program, or you've got to reach out. You've got to reach out to these and get into the program to do that. Because the thing is, if you don't on this stuff, as soon as this abatement or moratorium or whatever you want to call it on evictions end, they're going to ramp back up again.
And if I remember correctly, there's a limited amount of money for this.
There is. But the federal government is starting to move some more money in it. I don't have that off the top of my head, but I can tell you, the money that I know that we had direct control over, something that I chaired, over $1 million of rent relief went out to folks that are making 30% or below the area median income. 500,000 went over between 30 and 50%, and then roughly 100,000 went between 50 and 80%. So and there's just, but if I'm actually looking at the link as we're having this conversation, is extremely simple to fill out. It's a bunch of yes and no questions. You fill in the applications. It tells you what it covers, what it doesn't cover. There's some great information. So I dropped a link in there. If you should be of need on either side, please take a look at it.
That's an excellent resource. Daniel asked a question. He's curious what your thoughts are on signing a lease. Daniel Pettit. Hey. What are your thoughts on signing a lease for 2 or more years versus a 1-year lease? And would that help lock in a lower rent for the tenant for the longer term?
So I can tell you, because we just did it, we're working on that for one of our investment properties we do. And normally what happens, it isn't locked in for 2 years. The second year has an inflationary rate connected to it. Most leases will have anywhere, frankly, between a 2 to 4% year-over-year increase. So that was the point I was trying to make about hedging against inflation. If you own, rent these days, and we're going to have Suzanne help us with this on Monday, but rent these days are, anywhere close to town, or even out in Lake Monticello, is running anywhere between $12 and $2,000 a month, depending on what you're renting on that end of it. One thing is for sure, every year that's going to go up. You could negotiate something for 2 years, but most landlords at this point probably wouldn't do that, right? So the point that I was trying to make earlier is that if I was to buy a house and my mortgage payment is $1,500 a month or $1,200 a month or whatever it is, that's locked in for 30 years.
In a way that renting is not.
Where renting is not. And that's where the comment I was trying to make as far as hedging against inflation. And Dan, thank you for making us better today, brother. Anything else on the feed, sir?
No, sir.
All righty.
It's a quiet Friday.
It's a quiet Friday.
Much like us.
Much like us. I don't know, what can we talk about that's not real estate that we can get people all excited about? Whoa.
You on an electric bike?
Me on an electric bike. Ooh.
I know Yonna's really excited about your next bicycle purchase.
Yeah, don't get me into trouble. Mrs. Smith is not happy about
Would
this.
I get you into trouble?
You actually do. You do. Actually, we don't. Look, I don't really care who's watching or listening at this point. I'm going to look you in the face. I love you to death.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for everything that you do for us. Thank you for being part of our lives. Thank you for helping Yonna and I be better at what we do every day. Because I don't think we could not do this without you. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I love you to death, brother. And this was a big ask for you to come and sit here today. I know your schedule is super huge. Everybody knows that I am no Jerry Miller by any stretch of imagination, and to carry along a conversation, to do it the way he do it, his talent just blows me away on that stuff. But I love you, man, and thank you for doing this.
I appreciate you. Success is something people do together. You don't do it alone.
Oh, that's it. Are we in the dentist?
There's a drill.
Are we in the dentist?
I
got a question that comes in here. How does VR headsets, virtual reality, play into real estate game? Letting home buyers see the space without being there. Any thoughts? Thank you. I think that came from Nick. Thanks, Nick.
I'm curious to see how that plays out too. It got really loud in here, and we may have to do a whole show on how finding homes is changing.
With the drill or without the drill?
Without the drill.
Yeah, did we know we were having renovation work done there, Mr. Director?
They've been out in the hall for the last day because I never heard that.
Yeah, okay. Well, this is exciting. This has been a great show. We've got drills going on. I opened my heart to Quinton Beckham, which, by the way, I didn't get too much back. I'm just saying. I'm just teasing you. VR, interesting question for VR. Jerry and I talk about this all the time. He coined this term, this virtual curbside, right, or this digital curbside and all this stuff. And it kind of brings up a follow-up question to that is, are we going to be seeing changing of open houses with this Delta variant floating out there? I'll give you my old school answer to that. It's a great tool to learn. It's a great tool to use. These videos and these digital walkthroughs and these FaceTime walkthroughs are great. But man, there's nothing like walking through a house, right?
I'll tell you where I think I see this being a really useful tool, which we may have to give up on.
Yeah, would you mind, Judah, talking to them real quick? Thank you, buddy. I appreciate that.
Where I think this could be a useful tool is that we do have clients still.
Oh boy!
Wow.
It's getting better. This reminds me of my contracting days.
Or we may have to spread this topic.
Let's do this. Let's do this.
I think it could be a useful tool. You know, we have a lot of families that relocate due to the military. And so it could be a useful tool in getting people that need the home the minute their feet hit the ground, an opportunity to make the best possible choice. We still have some houses that are purchased sight unseen. And I think more than anything...
I'm seeing that dropping down a little bit.
Yes, but still present. And I think anything that allows a client to see a broader swath of homes and narrow down to some really, really great choices increases the whole efficiency and makes a happier experience for them.
Yeah, so I think we're saying the same thing, right? And I say about this all the time. This thing I'm holding in my hand, this iPhone, right? All this stuff, whatever, or on the computer, this will get you from 10 homes to 2 or some other number, right, that you're going to do. But eventually, you're going to have to walk through a home, right? And look, there's sight unseen. I did one not too long ago from somebody from Malaysia that bought a townhome sight unseen, right?
Yep.
Did a FaceTime walk through it. Everything was awesome. There was, believe it or not, buying it for her son that's coming to UVA. But we did a walkthrough and it was done and it was over. But 99.9999% of the time, you're going to want to walk through it, and you're going to want to touch and feel it. It's just. We're looking at some property for the land trust, right, that I was asked to take a look at. And we looked at it in pictures and so forth and so on. And I took a walk through it and it was very different than what the pictures were. And that's something you hear a lot, right? I hear a lot from a buyer's perspective. Well, hold it. This looks different, or this doesn't exactly look the same, or
we're really hard at imagining. Like it with any degree of accuracy.
So you're trying to say I don't have any imagination? Is that what you're trying to say?
No, I just think that there's the halo effect. You look at a picture and you apply all sorts of positive things to it that may not really exist.
So Nick, what do you think, man? I'm watching you on my phone here. Would you go and buy a house from VR, or would you just use that as a tool to narrow a house down? I think that's the lane, but I'd love to see what Nick's got to say.
Well, yeah, and I also think, look at how much stuff we buy without going to a store compared to 5 years ago.
Whoa, time out. So
I know you're going to tell me it's a big decision, that's a house, and it's not the same as a sofa.
I wasn't going to say that.
But
I wasn't going to say that. I will tell you, I just had an experience of buying a suit online.
Okay.
Which I've never done before.
Okay.
Totally, it was not the same suit. It was the same suit. It was the same number. It was the same everything. It is what I ordered, but I put it in a box and sent it back. 2 reasons. One, it wasn't the right size, but the second thing was the finish was very different. I couldn't touch and feel the finish. It had a different finish on it than I was. Now that sounds a little snobbish, right? But.
I don't know if it's snobbish.
But they were having a 70% off sale, and so I bought a suit.
I think everybody's going to move to what they feel the most comfortable with. I think that your spread of comfort and my bandwidth of comfort with this is probably less than people in different situations and different generations.
I just think it's going to narrow it down. Eventually, you have to get in there. So, open houses, are they here to stay, you think?
Yeah, they're not going away. Not anytime soon.
Are we going to...
Do I think they're going to be the masses of people that we've had in the past?
Oh.
Probably not.
Nick added an interesting... It was a reference to his Cuban Sicilian blood. But he noticed something, because Yonna talks about this all the time. When you walk into, thank you, Nick, for making today better. When you walk into a home, all your 5 senses kick off. VR, you'll catch everything except for the smell. It's very interesting. You noted that you kind of get this, the home again. And what's one of the tricks of the trade, right? When you're doing an open house, or what do you put in the oven? Chocolate chip cookies.
This is true.
You bake chocolate chip cookies because the house smells like chocolate.
But then we have to have the whole discussion about whether that is really central to the intrinsic value of a house.
It is not. But it smells awesome, though.
That might be as much as you being able to touch it.
But I guess what Nick is trying to add here, and just extrapolating it a little bit, is that playing Yonna's thing is you have to, all your five senses come into place, right? So if one of them is missing, right, it just doesn't make for a complete picture coming in there.
Which I also think returns to the idea that house purchases is a largely emotional topic.
He's using big words too, Nick.
Yeah. Jamie Turner is asking you what the price per square foot to build a home in Central Virginia is right now.
What the price? Was that just price, or did he put an expletive in front of that? No?
Do you all know the price per square foot to build a home in Central Virginia right now?
So the question is, I'll ask a backup question for that. I'm going to make the assumption it's a custom home, right? So there's a different price per square foot for folks that are in the production or semi-production world versus the custom. So if we're doing on the custom end of it, I'll be honest with you, about a year ago, it was like, I'd say $200 a square foot. It's pushing up to about $300. It's pretty hard to not see something that's in the high $2s or even the low $3s today on that end of it in the custom world. And then you have the whole question, and this is actually the roundtable that I'm hoping to put together is to bring Greg Slater to come in with two builders that come in. One's a production builder and one is a custom builder to tackle those questions of how these paths are going as far as cost per square foot. But production folks are a little less than the numbers I'm quoting, or somewhere in there I'm quoting.
And I think we're still moving through a lot of the swings in terms of the goods and services needed and labor to get a house from dirt to house.
Well, we saw lumber stabilize a little bit, but prices aren't stabilizing a little bit on that end of it. So I hope that was helpful. I squirmed in my seat a little bit. The recovering developer, custom home builder hates that question because that square footage is on the custom side is so open for interpretation, right? Do you want to have chrome plumbing fixtures, or do you want to have, gold-plated fixtures? Do you want 1,000 recessed lights or no recessed lights, or do you want, the design, the features, and all this stuff dramatically impacts the cost per square foot? Where on the production side, it's a little bit known because they have limited selection processes that you can go through. But the best course of action is if he's looking to do a custom project, let's assume that he's looking to do, is actually get in front of some builders and have those one-on-one conversations on that and say, this is what I'm looking to build, this is what I'm looking to have. The other thing to take into consideration, just to get off a little bit on the building side of it, which is my comfort zone on that stuff, if you're doing a custom home, things that are not calculated into square footage of the building but impacts the total price is if you are in the middle of 5 acres somewhere, how long is your driveway, running power to it, putting in your well, putting in your septic, if that's in that kind of situation, which adds into the total cost of the project or the home. So I hope that helped a little bit.
He said, thank you, that was helpful. And if you don't have a real estate agent or a trusted advisor, you should totally have one. That's an important feature because there is so much.
Yeah.
There's so much ability to vary the total price of the home based on things that you choose and where it's located?
Well, I will tell you, I'm going to take a quick look here real quick on some of the units that have sold, just to give you an idea on the, so I am looking at, hang on one second, folks. So I would encourage you to go ahead and get into the car.com, take a look at some of the homes that have sold, and you can actually extrapolate a little bit. You can pull out what's new construction, what's not new construction, and you can extrapolate a little bit. Hey, this is a kind of a home that I'm interested in. But to go back into Quinton's comment about, getting a trusted advisor, right? Bring in a real estate professional in to go ahead and do that, because these particular individuals can walk you through. I will tell you, I've been getting phone calls and texts and emails from agents from other than our firms asking me this very question about new construction. It is something that's on the tip of everybody's tongue about, well, tell me how I walk them through, because it takes a little bit of skill to help folks through the new construction purchase in the process on that. Anything else, sir? We're a little over our time here, and I can see the guy pacing back and forth behind
wanting to drill
Judah,
again.
wanting to drill and make noises again. Look, folks, if you got anything on the feed before I wrap up a little bit.
Jamie Turner saying thank you very much.
Jamie's a rock star. Thank you, Jamie, for it. Jamie, offline. You've got my phone number. It's on the screen. Call me. I'll help you point you in the right direction. So, folks, I've literally got a huge man filling up the door, looking at the door behind Judah, waving a drill. So apparently he's looking to get back to work. Safe travels, Jerry. I'll see you in this seat on Monday. Thank you for having enough faith in me to go ahead and go visit your family and sit in here. Hopefully I've done you somewhat proud sitting in this seat. Thank you to my dear friend.
Thank you very much for having me.
I couldn't think of anybody else better to sit to the right of me to help me through sitting in the center seat. So thank you very much. Please take a look at all our trusted sponsors and advisors across the bottom of the screen. Please support them. They are rock stars in our industry. Please reach out and help them. Guys, thank you very much. We will be back here on Monday for the Monday Market Monitor. I have to call Suzanne and let her know she's joining us on that. But we're gonna talk a little bit what happened over the last week in the real estate and continue this rental conversation moving forward. But anyway, guys, this is show, what would I wrote the number down, 190 something, 194, 2.5 years. You think I'd be better at this center seat after doing this for 2.5 years?
You did fine.
But I do want to throw something out to the feed, and folks, my phone number is there. Text it to me. On the 3rd of September is show number 200. And I'm trying to figure out what to do for show number 200. So Jerry and I are batting around the idea of having some hot seats and having people rotate in and out that have been awesome guests. You got any thoughts on that, Mr. Beckham, on what we should be doing? So would it involve alcohol?
I'm looking at that bar and it just looks so sad.
I figured it might
involve
alcohol over that way. Well, hey guys, it's 11:25. Thank you, and thank you again for listening, watching. Thank you for the sponsors. We could not be doing this without you folks. And you all have yourself a great weekend. Thank you very much. I'm going to sign off now. Thanks.